Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. We know we have quite a few people signed up this evening, and we're conscious that some might still be joining, so we just said we'd start a couple of minutes after 7. And thank you very much to everybody who's made it in already. My name is Roisin White. I'm a Communications Executive here at Fingal County Council, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar on the Sutton to Malahide Pedestrian and Cycle Scheme. Tonight we'll be presenting the preferred route to you. I look forward to taking your questions in just a short while. This webinar is being recorded, and that webinar recording will be made available on our website, which is fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide, and that is will be available in the next couple of days. There will be another one of these webinars also taking place next Tuesday, the 12th, at the same time of the evening. So if you can't make it to the end of this evening, or you have a friend or neighbour who might be interested, please let them know about it. We will be promoting it on social media, and the registration process is the same as it was for this evening. This public consultation began on March 24th and will end on May 9th. That period is to allow for as many interested people as possible to make a submission and to read the materials around the scheme. Submissions can be made by individuals, or they can be made by groups, for example, commercial associations or residents associations who might prefer to bring their views together as one group and make a single submission. And we really welcome your views on every part of the proposal that we're putting forward tonight. You can share those views at www.consult.fingal.ie. That's the usual consultation portal for anyone who's made a submission on a prior consultation. If you're new to it and you haven't done it before, you may need to set up an account in order to make a submission. But when you do so, you'll be able to view the submissions of everybody else who's put their views forward on this particular scheme and view all of the materials associated with it. So we'll begin with a short presentation from the project team, which is led by Senior Engineer Paul Carroll and our Senior Executive Engineer Cian O'Gallagher. We'll also be joined by Chris Fay of Atkins, our consultants, and then we will then move on to a question and answer session. This online event is intended to be your opportunity to ask questions of the team, including their consultants who joined us online tonight, and they are all here and ready to answer your questions. If you do have a question, please enter it into the Q&A box. You'll find a Q&A button at the top of your screen. We expect a really high volume of questions from quite a large audience tonight, and as many people might ask similar questions on a given topic, we may paraphrase or stick together some questions in order to cover as many of those as possible. So if you don't hear your exact wording read aloud, please don't be alarmed. A transcript of all of the questions as they were written in will be handed to the project team after the event, and they will have an opportunity to read all of your questions and comments in that format. In the highly unlikely event that we have any serious technical issues tonight, please bear with us while we endeavour to resolve them as quickly as possible. If the webinar is cut off and needs to be restarted, you'll be sent an email at the email address that you used to register for this event. Thank you very much again for joining us. We're going to get started now with a short video that showcases the route.
everyone. Sorry about that. Just having some small connection issues there right at the crucial moment. Paul Carroll is my name. I'm the senior engineer in Fingal County Council in the planning department, responsible for transportation planning. That includes forward planning for transportation and transportation projects such as this one. So we're delighted to be here tonight to talk to you about this project from Sutton to Malahide. We're really grateful for yourselves for turning up tonight and for all the people who've contributed to the consultation so far. This is a really exciting scheme for us. It's been in gestation for a number of years now. We've been working hard, particularly the project team here tonight in the last 12 months, to refine the design and to really get it to be the best possible scheme that we can to serve all the needs of the varied needs along the route and for the communities along the corridor. We see this as being a really useful route for everyday travel, for getting around the villages along the route, for getting from one end of the scheme to the other, and also as a more strategic route for longer distance trips, tying into the wider network that we're building and that is built throughout the Dublin area. So we're really happy to hear what you have to say tonight, and as part of the consultation we'll listen to everything that's on board. We don't know everything, or we don't have all the answers to everything, so we do rely on the community to kind of input and contribute as much as they can to make the scheme a better scheme for everyone. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Cian O'Callagher, who's the project manager for this scheme, senior executive engineer in the planning department. Cian.
Good evening, my name is Cian O'Callagher. I'm a Senior Executive Engineer with Fingal County Council, and I'm going to provide you with an overview of the project, the public consultation, and the next steps for the project going forward following the consultation. The Sutton to Malahide scheme will provide a coastal walking and cycling route linking Sutton, Baldoyle, Portmarnock and Malahide. Ultimately, it'll form part of a wider route connecting into the Sutton to Sandy Coast scheme to the south, and the Broadmeadow Way and Fingal Coastal Way schemes to the north across Malahide Estuary and on to the Meath border at Balbriggan. It's an urban scheme with mostly segregated pedestrian and cycle facilities extending to approximately 8 kilometres. The scheme in total will be 10 kilometres if you include the completed Baldoyle section. It will encourage tourism, recreation and business, offering an attractive, sustainable transport choice for residents, businesses, school children and commuters. It's a non-statutory public consultation, a consultation that's not set out in any legislation but would be regarded as best practice to consult at this stage, and it follows a feasibility and route options consultation in 2017. The consultation is for a 6-week period from the 24th of March to the 9th of May. We're consulting on the preferred route preliminary design. The consultation is to help us complete and develop this preliminary design in advance of a submission to Borough Planola in 2023. Public consultation material includes promotional videos and images to help the public to visualise what we would like the scheme to look like on completion. For the most part, these videos and images are a good representation of where the scheme will be. However, other areas such as Baldoyle Prom need further development, and what we've shown along there is conceptual in nature, and we're looking for the public's input into what they would like the prom to look like once the scheme is completed. We've published a number of media advertisements, including in press and on social media. We've distributed over 17,500 leaflets in the area. We have a consultation portal to receive submissions, which also has an online questionnaire. All the drawings, reports and videos and images are available on this portal. We're undertaking 2 webinars with questions and answers, one tonight and one next Tuesday. We've also had a drop-in information evening in Portmarnock Hotel last week. The next steps for the project team during and following this public consultation are to identify any issues of local concern raised, consult with key project stakeholders, That'll be an ongoing process beyond this consultation period. Review comments, queries and suggestions from the consultation. Publish a public consultation report. This report will contain all the data from the public consultation and report on all the key issues raised. This will help inform the development of the preliminary design going forward and help us to complete an application for planning to onboard Planola in 2023. During this planning application, there will be a further consultation period, and that will be a statutory consultation process. A high-level look at the project timeline, which is available on our console portal, highlights some key dates, including a planning application to onboard Planola in Q1 2023. We would hope to have a decision from the board by the start of 2024, and it would take possibly a year for detailed design and another 2 years for construction. So we'd envisage commencing construction in 2025 with a completion date in 2027. Feedback on the scheme proposal is important to us to help make the Sutton to Malahide pedestrian and cycle scheme a flagship amenity. Information can be viewed at fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide and submissions made through the consult fingal.ie portal. Hard copies are available at Baldoyle Library, Malahide Library and Fingal County Council offices at Swords and Blanchardstown. The consultation concludes on the 9th of May, and again we'd welcome submissions to help us develop the scheme further. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that presentation, Cian. In just a moment, we'll move to a presentation from Chris Fay of Atkins, who are the consultants on this project. And before we do so, I just wanted to give a brief reminder to please pop your questions into the question and answer box. We are seeing quite a lot of questions flowing in already, and we're delighted to have them. The main purpose of this evening, as we said, is to get an opportunity to help understand your concerns and queries and to answer those wherever we can. So please keep sending them in, and we'll look forward to answering them in just a few more minutes. I'll hand over to Chris now for his presentation.
Thanks, Roisin, and good evening to all. My name is Chris Fay. I'm a senior engineer with Atkins Ireland. Following on from Cian's presentation, I will give you a brief overview now of some of the more technical aspects of the proposed layout of the Sutton to Malahide pedestrian and cycle scheme. The contents of my presentation include an overview of the scheme and then a focused look at some sample locations and a discussion of the designs developed therein. The scheme as shown in the map to the left routes from Malahide in the north to Sutton Cross in the south, via the towns of Portmarnock and Baldoyle. Some key features include an overall length in the order of 8.2 kilometres, a scheme purpose to develop a high quality urban greenway that caters for leisure and commuter trips for both pedestrians and cyclists. Dedicated cycling and pedestrian facilities segregated from vehicular traffic are proposed. This will be obtained through the provision of a vertical curb and in most cases the provision of a half-metre wide buffer strip. Pedestrians and cyclists will also be generally separated by means of a low curb. In some limited cases, this will not be possible due to environmental and technical challenges. In such cases, alternative layouts are proposed, including shared path, boardwalk and shared street arrangements. Moving on, the following slides discuss the design detail of some sample locations. These locations include Strand Street, Strand Court in Malahide, Velvet Strand in Portmarnock Village itself, and Baldwin Promenade south of the village of Baldoyle. In terms of Strand Street and Strand Court, these are designed to operate as a shared street, meaning that cyclists are encouraged to cycle in lane with traffic. To ensure that the streets operate in this intended way, the street design incorporates a number of elements that encourage cyclists to confidently use the scheme in this manner. Measures include a 1 metre wide high quality paving trim material adjacent to the curb line, which will do two things. One being visually narrowing the carriageway, which will reduce vehicle speeds, and in combination with a smooth 3.5 metre wide surface along the centre of the street, will encourage cyclists to take that dominant position along the centre of the lane. High quality surfacing is also proposed to the footpaths, and this will extend to the raised table areas at crossings and junctions to give a greater sense of pedestrian priority. This image here shows a bird's eye view plan of the proposals at Strand Court and Strand Street. The perspective sketch here gives a visual representation of what the scheme will look like. In terms of Velvet Strand, the proposals include the provision of a segregated two-way cycle track along the pedestrian promenade with high quality surfacing applied to both. At Wendell Avenue, the junction is being revised to be more compact with smaller turning radii and corners, a raised junction table and upgraded crossing facilities. The public realm proposals also include the creation of a new terrace seating area at the location of the existing steps south of the ice cream kiosk. This will provide easy access towards the beachfront and offer opportunities for seating. Additional seating will also be provided at other locations along with street planters and low-level planting where space allows. The scheme as proposed will enhance amenity, offer opportunities to enjoy the surroundings and scenery, whilst also accommodating a high-quality pedestrian and cycle facility. The image to the left presents the design opposite Wendell Avenue with the raised table, the crossing and the transition from the cycle track to the shared area opposite the side road junction. The image to the right presents the layout of the terrace step area and the landscape proposals contained therein. This image pulled from the animation video presents the approach to the Martello Tower with the two-way cycle track provided on the coastal side. This image here presents the perspective sketch adjacent to the terraced area and shows how the two-way cycle track and promenade and bus stop and car parking all integrate together. Moving on to Portmarnock Village, the facilities here include the provision of a one-way cycle track on both sides of the road. This form of cycle provision has been chosen as it has the greatest ability to integrate with a busy town centre environment such as that of Portmarnock. This provision will require alterations to the existing streetscape, including the removal of car parking, local relocation of crossings and bus stops, and indeed narrow land take strips will be required along some property boundaries and gardens. The public realm proposals do seek to enhance the village centre environment, and this is in line with the aims of the 2010 Portmarnock Urban Centre strategy. As such, high quality surfacing is proposed to footpaths, and this is to extend to the raised table areas at crossings and junctions to give a greater sense of pedestrian priority. There is also potential for this to extend to other adjacent areas. However, consideration of these will be explored at the next design stage. The images here, the one on the left presents the junction at Carrickhill Road and how the one-way cycle track on both sides integrates with that junction. On the right-hand side, the scheme as it passes St. Anne's Church is depicted. On the left on this slide, the area at Golflinks Lane is shown with potential there for a public realm space at the junction corner. This area on the right hand side then is in advance of St. Lawrence O'Toole Avenue and is a location where property boundaries will be affected and a narrow strip of land take will be required. The image here shows the scheme perspective within the town centre and how it will integrate with the town centre. This image here shows the area in advance of St. Lawrence O'Toole Avenue where land take is required and how the scheme will integrate with the area at this location. Finally, at Baldwin Promenade, this section of the route is proposed to comprise of a wide shared cycle and footpath arrangement. A minimum 3.5 metre wide through route for pedestrians and cyclists will be maintained, and seating and planting will be incorporated along the promenade at regular intervals. These features will be positioned in a staggered arrangement to create a sense of interest and to offer opportunities for stopping and appreciating the surroundings. The public realm proposals include the area outside Baldwin Library, which will help improve connectivity between this area and the promenade. The proposed surfacing will be a combination of buff coloured asphalt and high quality paving. This type of pattern will further enhance the distinctiveness and attractiveness of the route along the promenade. It should be noted that there is scope for the provision of a segregated cycle facility along the promenade at this location, and consideration of this will be explored at the subsequent design finalisation stage. The images here show the promenade opposite the Baldwin Library and opposite the Borough Field Lane area. This image again is taken from the video animation and just gives the viewer a sense of the arrangement proposed along the promenade. And that's my presentation for now. I'll pass back over to Roisin and look forward to any questions which I'm asked to answer. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Chris, for that presentation. Just before we move on to the Q&A session, which we're very eager to get started, and thanks again for your questions. They're coming in thick and fast, and we're looking forward to receiving more of them as we get through them. Just a quick reminder, so all of the, particularly for anyone who maybe joined a little late, all of the comments that we're receiving in on the Q&A are very welcome, and we're delighted to answer any queries you have. If you do have comments, please make sure to also make a submission if you can. So you need to go to consult.fingal.ie in order to share your views there, and that's the best way to make your comments and your queries count in terms of the outcomes of this consultation, and would really encourage as many people as possible to participate in that. As I mentioned at the start, that can be done as an individual, or you can make a representation as a group, such as residents association or a commercial association or a club or so on, if that suits you better. We find that that works quite well for lots of people on various consultations. So without further ado, let's get stuck into our questions and answers session. We have a list of questions here that are coming in quickly, and with the first question I'm going to go to Cian, and the question is, at Baldwin, how are you separating cyclists and walkers from traffic?
At present, along Baldwin Prom, we've shown a high level of planting, and the intention is to move the existing low wall on the roadside out to the road edge and provide a wider prom. We have between 5 and 7 meters available there. We are looking at segregation as a potential solution to it. I suppose our images there are conceptual, and we're looking for local opinion again on what they'd like to see on the prom. There are a number of segregation solutions we can look at. We can look at lower level planting. We can look at seating. We have up to 7 meters in some locations, so planting and seating could be used as a form of segregation. There are also some innovations in curb design, kind of a round curb that helps bikes and scooters stay on track, that we're looking at as well. So purpose of this consultation is to get that local feedback and find out what people want and what people would like the scheme to look like and feel like once we've completed our design. So what we've shown is conceptual. We are looking at segregation also because the width there is available. So if you have opinions one way or the other on that, we'd appreciate people submitting those. Thank you.
Thanks, Cian. I hope that answer has cleared up the questioner's query. Next question I want to go to is for Chris from Atkins. And Chris, the question I've received here is, what are the cross-hatched road areas on the maps at Strand Street and Malahide, and do they represent a one-way road?
Thanks, Roisin. Yeah, the hatch marking along Strand Street is there to basically signify that it's a shared street along those 2 streets there, and I suppose the reason they're shown as that is just to signify the materials that have been chosen there. So it's important along those 2 streets that because it's shared street where you know there's not a segregated cycle facility there, it's important that both streets feel part of the route. And it is indeed, it doesn't mean that it's a one-way street, that 2-way traffic will be maintained along those streets. But the materials chosen there, as I said in my presentation, signify that we have a 1 meter strip either side of the street, which will visually narrow the road, and that does two things. As I say, it'll encourage vehicle traffic to be to reduce their speeds, and it will encourage cyclists then to use the centre of the road, and I suppose it'll be more comfortable and confident position for cyclists there. I would note that pedestrians are still in the way it's designed, are still there to use the adjacent footpaths either side.
Thanks, Chris. You mentioned the kind of visual cue there with the narrowing of the street in that area, and actually that plays into the next question we've received in, so I'll stay with you if you don't mind, which is that this person says they're very concerned that it looks quite narrow in places, and they're concerned that there needs to be room for buses and emergency vehicles to move through the route. Will there be enough space throughout the scheme?
Yeah, no, there will be enough space throughout the whole scheme. I suppose it's important to note that the scheme is designed in accordance with DMARS, the Design Manual for Urban Roads and Streets, and the National Cycle Manual, and those documents are both mandatory standards and best practice, which we apply to all the schemes that we design on. I suppose in terms of the widths that are proposed, I mean, like the minimum width of the carriageway will be 6 meters, and then the predominant width for cycle tracks and footpaths will be in the order of 2 meters each, and for two-way cycle tracks that are provided on one side of the road, that increases to 3 meters. But we generally have a half a meter buffer strip that just provides that comfortable separation distance between the cyclist and the adjacent traffic lanes. There are, of course, some localized pinch points that where we'll go down, rather than being at what I'd call the preferred minimum, where we go down to what I term as the absolute minimum. But those most of those locations are kind of locations where we are still kind of considering alternative designs at those locations. So in general, to close the question out, yes, there is sufficient width, and as Key noted as well, we're still in the design process, and we are, the designs will develop further, and no doubt through feedback, this very important public consultation process, we'll get plenty of feedback in that respect.
Thanks, Chris. It's clear that obviously a lot of thought has been put into those minimums, and the clarification is really appreciated, I'm sure. So to move on to another issue that's been raised here, we've had a question that says, why is the alternative design, which is one way at each side of the road around Borough Court, not superior, as it provides segregated space for pedestrians and cyclists? Cian, I might put that question to you.
Yeah, we've presented two options as part of this consultation. We're looking at a total of maybe 4 different options there. The segregated cycle lane on each side of the road would require the realignment of the road and the loss of the green infrastructure on one side of the road or the other, heading from Portmarnock to Velvet Strand. That would have a considerable visual and heritage impact on the area. We are looking at options, and we're hoping to meet with some local residents to discuss some options, but we are still teasing out the detail on that. To switch to two-way on one side, we still have continuity of the scheme for over 1 kilometre from that point to the village. So we don't believe necessarily that the changeovers are excessive at that location.
Thanks, Cian, for that. Our next question I'm going to put to Chris, and it's coming from somebody in the Baldoyle area who says, what happens to the cycleway around the Baldoyle Church?
I suppose on approach to Baldoyle, just to give some context, we approach Baldoyle Village, I suppose, from the north with a two-way cycle track, and then just in advance of the community centre, we then we traverse over to the from the landward side over to the coastal side of the road there, via Tucan Crossing, and then the route basically routes it also changes, I suppose, link type there in terms of we go onto a shared path, a minimum 3 meter wide shared path, but I think it's probably in the order of 4 meters there. So we route in behind the community centre and behind the church, and then really I know that section there is closed at the moment, so we progress then onto the I suppose the open section of the promenade, which would be from Baldwin all the way down to Sutton. But I suppose in focusing on that area behind the church there, so as I say, it'll be a shared path, and I suppose dictated by what's there at the moment, which is in the order of 3 to 4 meters. And I know that there's some level differences, and in terms of the condition of the structure and the pavement there, I suppose that'll be all subject to I suppose further review as we move on into the next stages of design. And also I'd also note there that as we begin get into the I suppose documentation of the environmental impact assessment, there'll be mitigation measures derived there that will ensure that I suppose the increase in pedestrians around the back of the community centre there, that it's properly mitigated, and that any impacts that could be imposed through the increase in users there will be mitigated to the fullest degree. So that's in a nutshell, that's kind of what's happening at the back there.
Thanks, Chris. That's a really comprehensive answer. I'm sure that's very appreciated. So the next question we have in is around land ownership and purchase of lands that might be affected by the scheme. So, Cian, I'm going to put this question to you, which is: have all landowners who are potentially affected by the scheme been contacted?
Yeah, I'll just highlight the process we're at this stage. We are not at the formal legal CPO stage as yet. We're at a non-statutory consultation stage. And at this stage, how we identify landowners is through the Property Registration Authority of Ireland's database. Now, it's not uncommon for that database to have gaps in the data. So at this stage in the project, that's the only information we have available to us. We've contacted everyone whose details are on that system, and it's not to worry about if it's not on the system, but that's how we identify landowners at this stage. If we have missed anybody, they can phone our customer service team in Fingal on 018905000 and leave details with them, and someone from the project team will be back to them. We've met a considerable number of affected properties at this stage. And again, if we've missed anyone, we would appreciate you coming forward, and we can arrange a site meeting to discuss our plans from there.
Thanks, Cian. Our next question is coming from somebody who's concerned about the road surface around the Visit Strand area, which it says, as a single surface for road users, why would we waste a high proportion of funds in a single space? Paul, can I put that query to you?
Thanks, Roisin. I think it's Chris probably covered it earlier a few minutes ago in terms of the Strand Street section, but it's essentially it's going to be a shared surface for vehicles and cyclists, and there's going to be measures put in place to improve safety for the cyclists using that section, and then pedestrians will still have the footpaths along there. So that's the reason why we're putting in a kind of a special surface treatment there. What that looks like in the final design will be developed over the next few months, but it's an appropriate intervention to make there where you have a particularly constrained situation, and you're trying to share a confined area with a number of different users. So as I say, it'll be developed over the next few months.
Thanks, Paul. So the next question is coming from somebody who's concerned about buses in the area. Why are you not allowing room on the road for buses to pull in so the traffic is not held up behind buses as they pull in at every stop? Chris, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's two reasons really for that, and the first one, and probably the important one for me as a designer of pedestrian and cycle schemes. The reason that we don't have the pull-in space is that like what we want to achieve is a low speed environment, and a kind of a passive way to do that rather than designing an overabundance of raised tables and speed bumps and all that. For example, is to have the bus lanes, the bus stops in line, as I term it, with the traffic lane. So it creates a passive self-regulating traffic calming feature in itself. So that for me, that's quite an important aspect, and it means then we don't have, as I say, an overabundance of traffic ramps, and that's that stuff that as the road. It is a regional road along the whole scheme, and we don't want to be having all these traffic ramps that are going to impede the progression of buses and emergency vehicles, and indeed the damage, I suppose, that those type of an overabundance of those type of traffic calming features can present. The other reason is, of course, that we've a certain corridor width that we're trying to work within. So there isn't, in most cases, there isn't the space to have a pull-in bay. And another thing from a design point of view that I like to implement in the designs is a consistency in how we treat different features such as bus stops. So they're the two to three main reasons, I suppose, why the bus stops are designed in that manner.
Thanks, Chris. So we have a question now around parking along the coast road. This person says they've noticed there's some removal of parking on the coast road, and they ask, how do we plan to address this? Paul, can you come in there?
Yeah, I suppose there is a small reduction in the number of parking spaces along Coast Road. I suppose this is a pedestrian and a cycle scheme, and that's what we're trying to deliver. So there is going to be impacts on other users. There's still a good number of spaces remaining along that area and throughout the scheme. What we're trying to do is to give people a really attractive, safe, convenient option that they don't have to use the car. So I would guess if you go down to High Rock or wherever on a sunny afternoon, and a lot of those people are probably driving from the other side of Malahide or Portmarnock or wherever, so it's to try and, I know some of them will probably be driving from further afield, but it's to give the people within the kilometre, 2 kilometres, that option to get there on a nice, segregated, safe route. And that's what the scheme will achieve. And there will be a reduction in the demand for parking as a result of that.
Thanks, Paul. So another question here around distance, this time around distance between pedestrian crossings. Could a breakdown of distance between pedestrian crossings along the route be provided, and how many in total are distributed over each kilometre along the scheme? Chris, can I go to you on that? I'm not sure if you have that info to hand. If not, we can probably add it to the FAQ document online afterwards.
I don't. I kind of. I suppose I don't have a breakdown of every pedestrian crossing along the route, but what I do have, and maybe this is the number of what the question is trying to get at. I do have a breakdown of pedestrian token crossings where we go from one link type to another link type in order to progress the length of the scheme. So that might be, for instance, where we go from two-way cycle track on the eastern coastal side over to the western landward side, for example. So what we have is, in terms of from that point of view, we have an overall of 5 transition points that are facilitated by those token crossings, and that's 5 basically over including the open section at the Baldwin to Portmarnock section of the route. That's 5 over 10 kilometres. So that's one transition point via a token crossing for every 2 kilometres. So that, when you look at it from that point of view, that's a reasonable level of transition points between link types and from one side of the carriageway to the other for a scheme of this length.
Thanks, Chris. That's really helpful. And just to reiterate, all of the scheme maps and design drawings are available on the consult portal. So that's consult.fingal.ie, and they can be viewed in full there by anybody who might like to have a little look through them themselves and assess how many crossings they can find within those maps themselves, if that suits. The next question that's come in is also around visuals and the consult portal. There's been quite a comment asked about gaps in the route when they watch the videos and where can they find details on the whole route. So as I said there, the whole route design maps are available on the consult portal and on fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide. The videos are intended to give you a view of the potential look and feel of the greenway, or sorry, I shouldn't call it a greenway, pardon me, the pedestrian and cycle scheme across the route, and we show highlights of those areas within that to show key points. So it doesn't show every inch of the scheme from end to end. We worked with a partner 3D visualization firm to create that, and the intention is that it helps people imagine what it might look like and encourage you to bring your comments and suggestions around areas that perhaps aren't shown or the ones that are shown and things you do and don't like. So that might be a topic for a submission for those who are interested. I'll go to our next question now, which is for Chris, and that's, as someone who's used cycle lanes as a commuter, what type of demarcation will there be so the pedestrians and cycles won't be in each other's way on the path?
So I'm not sure if that's in relation to the shared path arrangement or the two-way cycle track with the adjacent footpath. So I might answer both, but I suppose for the two-way cycle track with the adjacent footpath, the demarcation is really provided in two formats. It's provided with a low curb between the two-way cycle track and the adjacent footpath, with the two-way cycle track being at the lower level and the footpath being at the slightly raised level in the order of 60 mil. And then the other way it's demarcated is in terms of the material type that's used. So generally the cycle track will be bitumen macadam or similar surfacing, and could have some colorization in it to soften it for as it's in because it's beside the coast and it's sensitive area and that, and then generally the footpath will be either, depending on the area again and the context you're talking about, it'll be a concrete material or a higher quality paving material. In terms of the shared path arrangement, there is no demarcation along those sections. The idea there is that well, pedestrians have priority, but everyone is encouraged along those sections to, as I'd term, to share with care, and this will be reinforced with appropriate signage. I know for other greenway schemes around the country, there's been a whole kind of marketing and promotion of that type of courtesy between pedestrians and cyclists. And I suppose the reason why there's no kind of line demarcation is that particularly long areas like Baldwin Promenade, where we're proposing that kind of arrangement, because the promenade is an amenity in itself. There's every likelihood that you're going to get people congregating, and if you start putting in, demarcating it with lines, you get a very kind of you start to create a kind of a conflict then between pedestrians and cyclists, in terms of cyclists could be feeling that pedestrians are encroaching on their side, and vice versa with pedestrians. So by sharing it, you're kind of letting the shared path become self-regulated and a little bit more of a friendlier space from that respect.
Thanks, Chris. So another question here around the paths and how they'll be maintained. So they're saying, knowing how the paths can be littered with anything from stones to paper or glass, will there be any upkeep or cleaning done, and how frequently will this take place? Cian, can I put that to you, please?
Yeah, if we're to present these pedestrian and cycle routes as viable transport options, all year round. They require, maintenance, operational maintenance on a daily basis. Fingal have invested in a number of mini sweepers for existing paths. The width of these two-way cycle tracks is sufficient to get quite large sweepers in as well, also if required. So maintenance plans will be developed for them. There will be significant transport infrastructure in the same way as a road is. So all those issues will be addressed. Access, how our plant get onto them, get across them, and all that will be assessed and catered for. But like I said, the needs of pedestrians and cyclists is slightly different to road users, but it's just as important going forward to help promote the modal shift and present these as, like I said, viable transport options for local users.
Thanks, Cian. So the next question has come in around an area in Portmarnock, and the question is, why is there no landscaping plan for the Duckfield in Portmarnock Village, similar to the area proposed at the beachfront? Chris, can I ask you to come in there?
Yeah, I suppose that area there, I suppose it's an area that we've particularly to the south and around the Portmarnock Bridge, we've looked at quite significantly from an environmental point of view. In a previous iteration of the scheme, we were coming through on the coastal side there, I suppose linking in with the currently open Baldwin scheme, Baldwin Promenade scheme, via a boardwalk, and we have undertaken a report there, a marine ecologist report, and arising out of that, it was one area that we were, for the route itself, we were very much proposing to, when we looked at it again, we were leaving it alone in terms of the route, and I suppose any landscape plan there would start to encroach, I suppose, a little bit more than we probably. I suppose from that point of view, we haven't considered it. Not saying that we won't consider it, but up to this point, we haven't considered it from that point of view. And I suppose, I suppose, it's something that could be considered, and we might run it past our environmental consultants and see is there anything we can do to add to that area. But it's just from our previous experience of looking at the route, it was an area that we felt we needed to, the less we touched it, the better.
Thanks, Chris. So the next question is coming around protected structures. Are there any protected structure boundaries expected to be altered on the Malahide Coast Road? Cian, can I ask you to come in with an answer on that one, please?
Yeah, in terms of heritage, it's something we've looked at quite considerably on the scheme, and as I mentioned earlier on the Borough Court area, that kind of infrastructure is very important to us, and the feel of the roadway is very important to us, and we've tried to maintain the green infrastructure as best we can. We're also doing that with the built infrastructure. I can't comment in this forum in relation to any private properties, but it is something we consider, and we consult with the appropriate heritage professionals in terms of everything we do on that. So one of the objectives of this scheme is to retain as much green infrastructure and heritage as possible as well. So we want this as a route where people want to use it, and I think that there are certain areas of with distinctive character along the route, and we're endeavouring to maintain that as best as possible.
Thanks, Cian. I'll just pause in the questions here for a brief second to say we have a few more questions here coming in, and we're going to endeavour to get through a few more of them before we finish up for the evening. It's 5 to 8 now. We're going to try and stay a little bit longer if you're happy to stay with us while we try and get through some of those. So we'll continue to move on through the questions and get through as many as we can. The next question is coming around the Sutton area, which is, will the council consider a new boardwalk between Sutton Dart Station to link the Baldwin Promenade to Borough Road, rather than the CPO of 9 Gardens around the level crossing? Paul, can I go to you first on that, and Chris, you might like to come in as well.
Yeah, I suppose the first thing to say is, any land that we're taking at this stage is we don't we don't do it lightly, and we try to be conscious. It's a very emotive issue for people, as we all understand. It's we're interfering with people's houses that they've lived in and they've reared families in, and it's a sensitive issue. So we don't do it lightly. We've looked at different options, a number of different options around that particular area. It's a very difficult area to get to. We did look at a potential solution going around the back of those houses. It would bring us into the SAC, which would be problematic from a planning perspective. And I suppose it would also be not a particularly attractive route for people. We don't think people would like to use that. We don't think it would be a nice route to use on a dark evening, on a wet evening, for people. We want this to be a safe, comfortable route for all people, for all ages, for all abilities. So, I suppose the final thing to say is we're obliged under, as a public body going through an environmental impact assessment process, we're obliged to fully investigate all options. So I suppose that would be how I would sum up. We are happy that we will, by the end of this process, which is still a process and still ongoing, but by the end of this process, we will have fully exhausted all the different options, and we'll have a very strong rationale for the final agreed solution at that stage.
Thanks, Paul. Another commenter here around Portmarnock Village, he says it appeared pedestrians will be walking out onto quite a tight or narrow footpath close to the cycleway. Is that the case? Cian, would you like to answer that?
I'm not sure of the exact location being referred to, but currently the footpaths through Portmarnock are very narrow. We're going to endeavour to improve that where feasible. At present, coming from the schools, you have young kids trying to cycle down very narrow footpaths where they can't pass buggies. So our scheme provides significant improvement for pedestrians in terms of providing that facility for cyclists to pass. So, well, I'm not sure of the exact location. We will be endeavouring to provide an improved level of service for pedestrians where it's feasible throughout the village.
Thanks, Cian, for that answer. A question here now. Obviously, we hope that there'll be a lot of people using the cycle scheme when it's finished. Paul, can I ask you, is there provision for parking for bicycles along the route within this scheme?
Yeah, there will be. That will be, as you say, we want people to use it. We want it to be as convenient and safe for people as possible. We're conscious that people want to park close to where they're going. So there will be, and we'll be working hard to make sure that we provide as many useful, convenient bike parking spaces as we can along the route. They may not now be shown in the current drawings. I know we did get feedback on that in our event in Portmarnock, that there wasn't anything shown for people going to the village, going to the shops in the village and the school and that. So it is something that we will do. Probably should have said at the start, like, I suppose overall the design we think is probably 80 or 90% of the way there. It's not 100% complete. That's why we're kind of consulting on it at the moment, because there is scope to, to make sure we capture all of these things. So it's good to get that feedback that's people are conscious of that. That's what we want. That's the type of feedback that we can really incorporate into the final design.
Thanks, Paul. I want to jump back now to the issue around buses, because we've had a follow-up question there, which says, further to the answer given in relation to pull-ins for buses and no provision being given for that feature, is this open to negotiation during the public consultation process, or is that a fixed feature? Cian, you might like to comment there.
Yeah, in urban areas, there's been a move away from offline bus service areas, unless there's waiting times required. Bus Connects and the NTA have done considerable work on bus stop arrangements, and we're in consultation with them. However, like I said, offline bus stops are unlikely to be provided along the scheme due to the amount of land take required. Providing them online also allows us to retain a lot of the grasslands between Portmarnock and Malahide, and again retain the character of the area as best we can through the design. So at this point, I wouldn't envisage that we'll be using offline or inset bus bays along the route.
Thanks, Cian. Obviously, this scheme is one of only several schemes underway and under planning by Fingal County Council and across the county and across the Greater Dublin area. Paul, we have a question here from someone who says, is there coordination with other proposed cycling developments of that type, for example, the one that's planned for across the estuary?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very valid question. it's a key part of what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to build a network. That's what the research and the practice shows, kind of nationally and internationally, that cycling and walking infrastructure is only really as good as the network. So if the gaps in a network, it really affects people's use of it and the usability of it. So we're bringing forward a large number of schemes, including the one across Broadmeadow Way across the estuary. Continuation on from there, from Donabate north to Balbriggan, which would be a huge scheme, 30 kilometres. We're linking into the Sutton to Sandycove scheme at around St Fintan's there, which will bring you then straight down into Dublin City. New scheme recently started there from Clontarf into the city centre just a couple of weeks ago. Dublin City Council are doing that. And we also have a range of measures ongoing with our active travel department, which will branch off this Sutton to Malahide scheme. And people in Baldoyle would have seen a lot of changes on the streetscape there in the last few months, even with different routes being implemented. So there's a lot going on in that. And as I say, we want to build a kind of almost a spider's web of network to kind of make sure people can get where they want to go and make it as convenient and safe as possible, that people will choose to cycle and choose to make those 1 and 2 kilometre trips in a safe and sustainable manner.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to stay with you for our last question, which is, when will the scheme be approved and constructed? This person says the timeline at 5 years seems very long to them, and is there any scope for stages to be progressed in parallel during the process?
Yeah, no, I mean, these are large, complex schemes, and it does seem quite long. It seems quite long to us when you're working on it, but that's how long it takes. So we have to take our time and be careful in how we do this, because we'll get one chance to do the planning application, and it's going to be, it's going to be an investment of public money, and we need to make sure that we spend that money wisely, and that we do so with the support and the backing of the community and all the stakeholders along the route. So to answer the question, I suppose we'll be completing the design for the remainder of this year and preparing a planning application, which we envisage going into on Board Planola, because it needs an environmental impact assessment, and because it will need an appropriate assessment, which are various a type of planning application when you envisage that there's going to be particular impacts on the environment and on special areas of conservation. We envisage that will go into the board on Board Planola maybe in the start of Q1 of 2023. It'll be in with them for, we imagine, at least a year, if not longer. There may be an oral hearing as part of that. The landowner consultations will continue on in the background as well in parallel to that. We would hope to get land acquisition by agreement. Failing that, we'll go through the CPO process, which will also go into the board at the same time. So planning stage, essentially design and planning stage, we see going through 2022, 2023, construction procurement then 2024, and commencing construction potentially 2024, 2025. And we would see a 2-year construction program on this. So that's the kind of time frame. It's not as fast as maybe some people would like, but it's a realistic time frame. Following this process, I suppose the next kind of milestone for us would be we'll gather up all the submissions which have been made through the portal, and we will prepare a report which we will likely present to the local area committee, your local councillors, and we'll also publish that on the consultation website. And I believe if you've made a submission, you'll be notified of any changes to the website as well. So you should get a notification when that goes up. And we'll prepare a report based on, if we get hundreds of submissions in, we'll prepare it on the main themes and the main kind of topics that people are concerned about and our responses to that. So I think I'll hand back to Roisin now.
Thanks, Paul. Just to add to Paul's comment there around submissions, if anyone is interested in seeing the content of submissions made by others, you can do so on the portal. Once you're logged in and have set your account up to make your own submission, you'll be able to view all of the others as they come in. What the process we take is that we read them, we moderate them to make sure that there's no personal information such as people's addresses and so on are removed, or phone numbers and redacted, and those are saved for our use internally but not shared with the general public, as that wouldn't be safe to do so. And then those are approved and raised to the portal. So as they come in, they're quite quickly placed up on the submissions portal for everyone to view, free access, and we'd welcome you to read others as might find them inspirational or helpful in preparing your own submission, and we get that feedback from people regularly. So thank you so much to everybody who submitted a question this evening. We've been really grateful for getting them on and being able to have an opportunity to answer so many questions and queries. We hope that we've given you lots of clarity in terms of our proposed plans for the scheme, and we hope that we've been able to allay any worries or concerns you might have had. If you would like to further view any of the details around the plan, really look at those videos, particularly the one that was shared this evening, which has just been starting to be publicised today. Those will be available, as I said, all on fingal.ie/Sutton to Malahide. So that's 2-0 TO rather than the number 2, I should say, Sutton to Malahide. And you'll find all of the information there. As I said, the recording of this webinar will be added there in the coming days. And if you'd like to join us again for a repeat of the same webinar with further opportunity for questions, you're more than welcome to do so next Tuesday evening. The form is available to register on consult.fingal.ie for that event. Thank you very much to the planning team and to Chris from Atkins who joined us this evening to be able to answer your questions. And thanks also to Sean Martallo who presented this webinar and produced this webinar. Please remember that if you intend to make a submission, those submissions need to be made before 23:59 hours, so a minute to midnight on May 9th. As we said, it's a number of weeks for the consultation period, and we really welcome all of your views and comments. The best way to have your views heard is to record them within the submissions. We hope to have a high volume of submissions that are starting to come in already. Thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate you coming to join us online this evening. We know it's difficult to do so sometimes, and we all have lots of things going on, so it's great to see people engaged in the process. We'll end the webinar here, and hopefully we'll get to speak to you in the coming weeks again.